Welcome to Big Blend Radio's Art Show, featuring Victoria Chick, a contemporary figurative artist and early 19th and 20th century print collector. So October is the Arts and Humanities Month, and this is really important. It's about all the arts, whether it's music, painting, sculpture, clay, dance, film, photography. It is about encompassing all of the arts and the importance of the arts. And the other thing is, how does art impact humans? How does it impact people's lives? Where do they go when they get this in their very first art experience? Some, it leads into an artistic path. Some, it leads into a creative path, maybe in their careers. That, I just talked to a CPA today who is a retired CPA who wrote her first novel, and she was like, oh, yes, there's creativity in that. And look at it. She wrote her first novel. It's amazing. So art, whether it's writing, painting, dance, always affects us in some way. And it's a keeper of history. It's a storyteller of humanity. And so today we get to turn the tables on Victoria. Victoria Chick has been on our shows for since day one, and we're going on 19 years in 2026. She's also been with Big Blend magazines prior to that, back when we were print and all of us living in California. Now, Victoria, as you know, is based in Silver City, New Mexico, which is in the Southwest region, close to Tucson and El Paso and Las Cruces. And she is working really hard to open up with her board the Southwest Regional Art Museum and Art Center. And this is a museum of art and art center. So it's education. They already have tons of art to showcase. They have an entire library of art books for research, but they're looking for a building. But this has been a project. I remember her telling Nancy and I, Silver City is an art community, but it needs a fine art museum, an actual true art museum dedicated to the arts. And this is not something that just happens overnight. And it is getting closer and closer and closer. They are really looking for funding. So check out southwest-art-museum.org to learn more about that. But her pathway is very fascinating. Not only is she a contemporary figurative artist who has done exhibitions all over, galleries have collected and shown her art all over, and she collects early 19th and 20th century prints. On our shows, she is forever a advocate for all these artists that may not be so well known, but to keep their legacy alive. And that's also what happens in a museum, is keeping these artists' legacy alive. She's talked about famous artists too, but I think it's really special how art really can shape someone's life. Victoria, is that a good introduction or what? That's pretty cool.
Lisa, that was a wonderful introduction.
I'm just going off. I'm not. That was you. I've just known you for so long, but it's beautiful.
I know. Oh,
it is.
That's great. Well, there's so many artists. You're right. We have talked about this before, and we'll probably keep talking about it. How many artists there are that have provided so much joy and insight to their work for people to benefit from. And so I like to bring up a lot of artists who were very famous in their time, but their time was in the past, and so we don't hear about much about them anymore. So I kind of like to dig them out, more or less, and research them a little bit.
And sometimes, great artists pass away very young, and you've done that.
That's true.
And also, or just weren't accepted in their time, sometimes ahead of life, right? And so that happens a lot in art. Van Gogh, look at that story, right?
Yes.
Is one of those famous ones. And the really sensitive beings that feel things, are observant, and artists, and I'm talking about all, like music, art, all of that. It's so important. Over the years, you have taught me so much, and I thought I knew some stuff because Nancy is a fabulous artist, as you know, my mom, Nancy, and incredible wildlife artist. And, I've toured the world with her all through Africa and, England, and here in this country with her art. I used to sell her art, not knowing anything, but people buy things from kids, especially if a kid gets spot up some art. art. And
Well,
but the art was
I'm sure they bought Nancy's stuff because it was good too.
yes, they did. They did. But I think helping as a kid helped it, a little, just a little.
Yeah,
But the reality is through her, I learned composition, whether it's photography, painting. I also learned
yeah,
about don't mess with an artist when they're on their path. Like when she tells you go to your room and play, she really means it. But but really, but the appreciation of how you treat things. I think I understood about treating a record collection, books, and plants and music and anything artistic, photography, anything with care because of seeing the process. And so that's what I love about what you're doing with the museum is it's also about education and taking it also outside of Silver City and into the smaller communities because
right.
when you see something happen and be created, you're like, wow, I didn't know you could do that. And there are so many over the years, not only we talked about different artists and different styles, but there's all these different mediums that I didn't even know exist. The other day I was looking as someone was putting porcelain on top of copper and I'm like, what? I didn't know that was an art thing. Now I'm all like fascinated. Rabbit hole. Here we go. But that's the
Yes.
thing. It's never ending in the world of art. So for you, let's start at the beginning. Let's start to,
Uh-oh.
I know, we're going to
Mm.
go back to you being a little kid. Where was that?
Well, that was in Minnesota. I was born in St. Paul, and we lived in various little places, but my we always seemed to be near a lake, and that may have been just because it was Minnesota, but because it's hard to not be near a lake in Minnesota. Um, so I lived there, and I had a pretty good childhood. My very protected childhood, I would say. Um,
Mm.
but I got into trouble with my first artwork when I was about two. We lived in an apartment, and my parents had foolishly given me crayons to play
Uh-oh.
with. And so I went, of course, immediately went off the paper and up the walls. And apparently the landlord didn't think much of my creation. And so my parents had to uh, pay big bucks at the time for rehabilitation of the room. But anyway, I still kept on anyway. So
Mm.
that slowly slowed me down a little bit. But when I was going to school was the best thing for me, um, because I went to a school just outside of St. Paul in a village called Little Canada, and it was not much of a town. It had two lakes and two. It had a grocery store sort of, and it had five taverns. And the school was really great. The school was a four-room schoolhouse. The teachers were fabulous. Our principal was a sixth grade teacher, so we weren't bogged down by administration, and the teachers pretty much um, did everything. We didn't have an art teacher. We just had a first grade teacher who also taught second grade at the same time in the same room. And we had a third grade teacher, a fourth grade teacher, fifth grade teacher, and we had the sixth grade. Every teacher gave us uh, every teacher gave us an opportunity to do art.
Mm.
We didn't call it art. We didn't call it art, but it was like an integral part of every subject. Even like in arithmetic class, we were doing art projects because it helped us visualize um,
Hmm.
problems. Um, it was um, it was just in every class, and so it comes back to me now because I'm working with a school district where they would like to have an art teacher, but they can't find one because it's a very very rural area near the Mexican border, and they can't attract an art teacher. So we'd like to show them, and we're arranged to to go down there to work with their teachers about how they can integrate art into every subject. So we hope that works out well for the children.
That's
'Cause
I love that you say this because, and it also goes down to funding, right? Funding is always an issue on everything when it comes to the arts,
well,
period.
yes,
And
yes.
it is.
But,
But then we have wonderful people out there in the world that really do support the arts. And I'm
yes,
so grateful for them because I think that's how I ended up getting lessons and extra things that um you have where you get a teacher that is able to be hired that has those abilities because that's an extra ability, I think, when
yes,
you know how to put art into everything. And art is part of mind mapping. Like when you're faced with a problem to draw it out, that's a visual thing. It could be an audio thing too, depending. Every child takes in something, whether it's visual or audio or both, right? That's part of what we've learned through some of the education programs we've done on the shows and been part of, like Super Camp, we did for many, many years. We actually went to school with teachers to learn, and it was like almost like the same as running a radio show in a way. I was like going, wow, this is it. You ask questions. How do you take in the information? And the teachers have to learn how the kids are studying, and the kids need to learn how am I studying, and so do the parents. How are you taking in
yeah,
the information? Some don't want to hear. Right. But we're showing like with podcasts and audiobooks today and music, that audio is huge. Visual is huge, right? Reading,
yes,
we need to boost some more. And reading is really, really important because it allows us to co-create and have imagination in our mind while we're reading. If you read a novel, right, versus the movie, you'll never like the movie as much as the novel because when you read the novel, you've already set what the characters look like according
right,
to
right.
what the writer said. You've already envisioned it, and the movie is never going to be what everybody wants because everybody's envisioned that. And I think that's a beautiful thing. And I think art does
Well,
that. Every mode of art has this a way to like inspire you and to create you to go like what you're talking about, even in math, like the drawings, like you're saying
yes,
about math, that it's like when they showed 4 apples and then 2 apples and then that equals 2. When you say 4 minus 2, when you put a visual with it, we start to understand because isn't art reality, Victoria, in a way? Like when you think about it, if you don't put the
yes.
real
Well,
story, it doesn't make
yeah.
sense.
Everybody, well, if we all had normal, that's hard to say. Normal vision, normal mechanical vision. Then, if we can use that, we are so much ahead. But some people don't have that. But they can learn it many times. If someone is not totally blind, for instance, they can learn to see. I some some people though who have normal vision don't really see. They look, but they don't really see. It's like
Mm.
you can get through a room, or you could drive. If you're older, you have a driver's license. You could drive down a road. You can go 10 miles maybe to your work, and then if you arrive there and you can't remember how you got there because because you're operating on a level that most people don't operate on, and you're not using everything that your
Mm.
brain is capable of. So um,
Mm.
I I think and using all the senses, the audio, visual, even kinetic, using sense of
Oh, that's right. Touch.
texture,
Yes.
sense of touch, all these things you should start doing when you're a baby because you're building the whole time you're an organism you're building on all these levels and all these sensory things that we
Yeah.
have that are so wonderful that um I feel blessed to have been hatched hatched by my parents because they were they allowed me to do stuff. They allowed me to crawl around. They allowed me to go out in the backyard and look at stuff. It's a way I learned, and I
Mm.
don't know. I think a lot of kids, because of the kind of situation that people have lived in the last 20 years, maybe 25, maybe 30 years, they didn't have the opportunities that kids earlier had, um, where they could, people are so scared of living, of things that are out there to get them, that many times, they go to school, then they immediately go home and they're locked in basically because out of fear
Mm.
or apprehension.
Well, I think
So
we've
they
gone past living, we're living in a comfort zone. And I had a friend who her newborn baby wasn't allowed to go out in the dirt, but it was, not newborn, but when it was crawling around, she would rather it crawl on a carpet than in dirt. And we're going, let me tell you what's really dirty. Your carpet sucks,
yes,
you know?
yes,
So,
yes,
but this is a
yeah.
comfort zone thing that we've become very like, let's all be in our little boxes on the hillside and everything. But art is about triggering other things and making you think differently, like you were saying. And it is to pull you out of a comfort zone. I remember I'm going to say about 10 years ago, you and Nancy were on a podcast together talking about art, and we had gone through to an art walk in, I think it was Henderson, Nevada, or outside of Vegas.
Uh-huh.
And yeah, this was about 10 years, maybe more. No, it's going to be 15 years, whatever. It was a while ago. And we'd gone through this art walk and went through like some crazy art stuff. It was cool. And Nancy had seen some painting, and it was like the corporate pig had shot the apple off of someone's head, kind of like a William Tell overture, but there was like a big
Yeah.
pig or whatever, and it really made an impact. And it bugged her. And you're like, that's fantastic. And she's like, she loved it, but she's like, in one way, she would want to hang it on her wall, but then she didn't stop talking about this painting for about a year. And now she's going to start up again now. But do you remember that? I don't know if you remember. It was a while ago, but she had this like, it riled her up. She didn't
Yeah.
like the gun part, but she got it. And that's part of why she liked it, because she didn't like the whole, it really affected her. And isn't that good? I remember
Well,
you saying, Nancy, I think you found your painting or something like that. You're just,
things do get a person riled up in one way or another. Yeah, I think. Well, it's not necessarily that you really like the painting. You don't have to like it, you know. But the good thing about it is that it is powerful enough that if you're getting a real reaction from it, one way or another, and I think that's healthy, because when you start getting a reaction and you start questioning, why do I think that, or why is that affecting me the way it is? And so art is that particular piece of art. you know, you're not going to want it necessarily. But the artist, the skill that the artist put into it has certainly brought something out that gets a reaction. And
mm,
you may not call it great art, but you even disliking it is okay, I think, because it proves what's there visually is has a power to it.
it's true. It's so fascinating how we have all these ways of how art has influenced our lives. So you started with crayons. I don't remember. Nancy was doing some big series, and you paint in series too, which I want to get into. I was a
Yeah.
kid and I decided to add to her paintings, thinking I was being her best daughter and helping her.
Yeah.
And then I
Yeah.
was really told to go play in my room after that. But I don't know, everyone has these moments. And it just dawned on me a moment I had that has actually been a huge part of my life, and I didn't get it till we're talking about this. But has there been a moment for you, even, and especially as a young person, that you can go, I'm doing this as a career. I'm doing this in my life. This has to be part of my life. Maybe you're going to do other kind of careers in between or whatever. Everyone has a different things happen in life, right?
Yeah.
Did you see any pieces of art or literature or
Yeah.
anything that made you go, like, this is my calling, this is my soul kind of thing?
Absolutely. I went when I was 13. I went to the Nelson Gallery of Art in Kansas City because we had moved there at that time. And went there the first time, and went into the American American gallery. This is sort of more. It was more contemporary art. But I saw a painting by Richard Diebenkorn, who was already pretty well known. Although he didn't mean anything to me as a name, but his painting just knocked me over because he was using paint descriptively. He was using very loose paint. He wasn't making edges, but the colors that he used and the way he put the paint down, it was I had an emotional reaction to it, even at that time I said I want to do that. And because I particularly liked the way he did it. Now I didn't copy him or anything, but his work really had an impact on me. And so yes, it was a very powerful moment for me to actually be able to express that that's what I wanted to do. And so I was really lucky because I had a high school art teacher who was very, very, I would say, formative too for me, and very encouraging. And um, anyway,
Yeah.
that was it. And that's what I kept doing. And then I went to college. I didn't stay very long at the first school I went to, but the guy who was the chairman of the art department was a professional artist, and he taught me ways of working, not how tos, but how to adopt an attitude that it was a professional attitude that I was really working at. I was working at improving myself. I was working at how I approached every day. You know, if
Wow.
you every day you should spend time in the studio every day. And so that's what I was really influenced by too. And I think that was really good advice,
You know what?
because
This is so huge.
you don't have to be in the mood. Forget the mood. You just have to go into a studio and something will happen. Something you'll pick up something, and you will start drawing, or you will start painting. Um, you may not be sure of it when you start out, but it'll turn into something. And you may love it. You may, or you may think it's not so great, but it may set you off in another direction. The studio is magic. It's a magic place, and uh, I can't stress enough how being in a studio and just allowing yourself to to be creative
Well, you're talking
is
about
important.
practicing. You're talking about practicing. I remember interviewing Julia Cameron, who wrote The Artist's Way, and
Hmm.
you know, I remember talking to her. It was a different book that she came on this show for. She came on. She wrote The Artist's Way, but she came on with a different book and talked about sobriety a lot. And we talked about the importance of being very consistent in craft, right? And so it's like,
Yeah,
you know, I'm already working at 3 in the morning. It may be on my phone and it may be just gathering my thoughts or thinking. I have a weird thinking process, and it starts at 3 in the morning. And at certain times at night, I know you need to stop. You're going to mess everything up and have to redo it. You already know what you want to do. And I use my brain. Like, I tell my brain what to do. If I need to
right.
make a decision, I tell my brain, you're going to think this out. No, I don't use AI for it. Just saying. So it's what you were talking about with that, you know, professor or teacher is like, he's teaching you this way of life so that you're practicing and you're in it and you're doing it and it's becoming who you are. It's part of
Yeah,
it is. And if you can't do what he said about going into the studio every day, well, then you aren't going to make it. If you're lazy about a passion, then it's truly not your
yeah,
passion, I believe. You know,
right,
I just
right.
watched a podcast with an entrepreneur where she was talking about, here are the successful entrepreneurs, millionaires, billionaires, all of this. She said, here's the one thing that they have in common. Every single one of them are obsessed, and it doesn't matter about the money value. The successful people are obsessed with what they do. right? And I really believe that what he was
Yeah.
setting you up for is that same thing. If you don't want to go in the studio, it's like telling me like not to play music every day. Like screw that,
Yeah.
but
Right.
Julia Cameron said the same thing. We were talking about the power of walking and how walking gives you, how we love our 1 hour walks and everything. And,
Right.
it, it's about observance and nature is taught so much. And so I was asking her like, well, do you walk before you write? Do you write before you walk? What do you do? She's like, each person's different. But the thing is get out there. And she prefers to walk
Yeah.
first because it all is that part of it. And then you become anxious, like you want to get back in there and write it down, even though you're out on
Yes.
that walk.
Yes.
So it's creating a way of life. And it's true. I think if you didn't have that way of life, you're not going to have that success because it has to be part of you. This whole thing of 9 to 5 work and then you have dinner and then you must do this and only work between 9 and 5 is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. And I think the artists in the world are the first to really showcase that that's just not the way it works. What do you think?
Yeah.
Do you have to be 9 to 5? Like to do what you do
Well,
as an artist?
I like I like a certain degree of regularity. I don't not in a box regularity, but I do like
I say we
I
all
do
want to
like
be regular. Sorry.
I like to eat. I like to eat. A part of it is being married. I think being married makes you more regular because you've got two people usually working, and you have to set aside certain times to do certain things.
Perfect.
But to make things go smoothly, I know when I went to graduate school, I had a hard time in graduate school at first because um, I was always working for a teacher, and
Oh,
graduate just dress. I hadn't found my niche yet, and I probably went to graduate school too early because I didn't have enough experiences. I don't think. Because I as I developed other interests, other working places, um, I found something. I found something that was worth telling visually. So I had skill going into graduate school, but I didn't have a point of view
mm.
that was important to me. Excuse me.
But that comes
So
with
anyway,
life. Because don't your point
yeah,
of
it
views
does.
change as we
It
go?
really does
As
because yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. You have experiences in life, and so those are important. Um, uh, so I got married the second year I was in graduate school. It's probably a big mistake because the guy I married was not very appreciative of visual art. Why did I
oh
marry him?
yeah,
I don't know. But anyway, um, uh, I graduated. We moved. I had to work. There were no teaching jobs. No teaching jobs in universities that were available at the time I graduated in the 70s. And
mm,
so I took a job doing something else because I had to have money to live. So
yeah.
I I freaked very fell into this freakish job that I never thought I would do. I started working in as a occupational therapy supervisor. Now, don't the title does not tell the story because I didn't even know what an occupational therapist was. Except what they wanted to do, really, they were calling it occupational therapy, but what they really had was an arts and crafts program that was bad. Okay,
Mm,
and they knew it was bad, and so I worked. There was an occupational supervisor that was licensed, and she would come in once a week. And other than that, I was setting up this crafts program, which at the time it was they were weaving yarn in and out of plastic baskets and making things that to me that that a rational person else would see as busy
mm-hmm.
work. It was nothing, it was nothing personal about it. Anyway, I changed that over. I worked there for 16 years. It was a wonderful job because I could be creative with it. And after I did it for about Oh, I did it for about 10 years, probably 11 or 9 or 10 years. I heard about art therapy and I thought, that's what I want to do. That's well, by that time, that's what I was doing because I got rid of the plastic baskets and, and, gave them clay to work with and gave them paint and gave them paper and got them being creative and talking about what they were painting or who the figure was that they were building out of clay, and um, and so we were doing therapy, but we weren't calling it that. Okay, at that time, and but then I apprenticed myself to a registered art therapist because at that time there were only three schools in the country that taught art therapy. Now probably almost every university does. But so I got grandfathered in to the American Art Therapy Association, and so that gave me a little bit of clout. But I didn't really need clout. I just enjoyed what I was doing, and I enjoyed the old people. I they enjoyed what they were doing. They got they got very verbal, and that was good because a lot of them were stroke patients, and they had a hard time saying what they were feeling. So
Mm.
drawing what they're feeling was helpful because it was helpful to me. It was helpful to the nurses. Uh, it was I had a psychiatrist that came in that uh, sort of uh, worked with the people that I was working with. So it was a good milieu for me and for them, I think.
Well, that's what I
After
was
I
going to say at the
after
beginning when you were in there, when, and I've seen this in nursing homes, and our band used to go and play in them. Um, is like here, it's kind of like string these beads together and you're doing something, or you're
yeah,
going to
yeah,
learn how
that's
to
it. I
crochet,
mean,
but you're just doing one long string to kind of shut you up and keep you
but
active.
the value that they call that occupational therapy, or that you'll find that in occupational therapy, not 100%, but the value in it is is there because it helps their coordination and all that kind of stuff. It's just that after a while, it's just mind numbing,
Yeah.
and it doesn't give them a full human experience, really.
Right.
So so
Right.
so that's what we were after in art therapy. And
It's like
um
giving them this extra layer where, hey, you can do this and be somebody. I understand what you're saying on the occupational therapy, like you're learning how to put your hands back together, especially with
yes,
strokes. Stroke victims are often one side is like the whole one side of the body is not moving like the other in speech, in movement, and all kinds of things. So what you're saying, I absolutely agree. But it is that thing where now it has to have that other layer on top of that once you get your two hands together to do the crocheting or the whatever painting. But doing clay, it goes
you
back to
got to
that
be a
kid moment, right? Didn't we
yeah,
all love
yes,
clay as kids? That was best. And I think
yes.
that's why crayons were the coolest thing because they did melt and I learned how to melt them. Nancy's sitting on the other
Well,
side
that's
and
good.
she knows.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, another real interesting thing that happened was you're in a nursing home, let's say, and you need some help eating, or you're slow or whatever, and they set the tray down in front of you, and they come back a little later, and the person can't talk either. Okay, they've had a stroke, and so they say, "Are you done?" And they don't answer, so they take the tray away. Well,
oh my
they're probably
gosh.
still hungry. They're probably still hungry, and what with our therapy is, you find out, is that they don't they the nurses haven't they I don't say that they haven't picked it up, but it didn't come in on their order that these people had a visual deficit.
Mm.
Okay, because they had a stroke. Now part of their eye vision field has been knocked out, and it's usually like it's a quadrant or a quarter or a half of their visual field is blank, and that's
Wow.
usually if it's the lower part, they can't see the tray, or
Oh,
they can see the upper. they can see the upper edge of the tray. They don't know there's food down below to eat. So a nursing home has, a lot of staff, which is
Mm.
unusual, that they don't realize that the person isn't getting enough to eat.
Wow.
So there's all kinds of things that where knowledge of art helps, or the person just looking at the situation, having the time, like I had the time. I wasn't a nurse's aide, and I wasn't rushed, so I had the time to look and see that the person
Mm.
wasn't
Well,
able to
this
see.
is
So
this is goes to observancy, right? And artists have a
yes,
sensitivity and an observance level and the patience. Like I would watch
yeah,
Nancy take photos and photos after photos and photos that made no sense as art, but she was using them. This is out in the bush in Africa. She would take photos after photo. Like we would watch an animal for hours. Sometimes you get a pride of lions, and she's now going to photograph every bit of this pride of lions. And it wasn't for, here's a pretty art picture. Of course, you got those, but it was to photograph their muscles, their this and that. Like if you take
you
Nancy's,
study.
she was studying
Yeah,
and she could take it back. Now you're home. What are you going to, it's like people go to, if you want to ever rile up Nancy, when people go, oh, I've taken this photo or this painting of a lion. And she's like, no, you didn't do your due diligence. You're taking it from a zoo. You better say, this is like AI art versus, this, you might as well just call it that at this point. Because an animal, like a lion in a zoo, is fat, full of
yeah,
antibiotics. You can tell their eyes aren't like what they are. And she would look at this lion's, you could tell by the age of how thin they were, whether there was a drought. And like her wildlife knowledge came through her being an artist to be observant. So she knew more about the
yeah.
animals because of that. And this is the same with you and the people. This is so cool. How amazing. I wish she was on the podcast right now because she'd go off too. But you're observing the people better because you're an artist and
Yeah,
that's what you do. And not only that, there's a layer of, I can't explain this part, but there is an energy sensitivity, and I'm not being woo woo and all that, but it's you, there is a level of understanding. So like when you observe people, you know how people are going to move at a certain point at time. Like as a photographer, you know that.
yeah,
And photography with wildlife, this as a horse person and animal person, and
right,
definitely what you do as an
right.
artist, your whole thing is that movement. And it's like if you want to kill a fly, understand the fly flies backwards first.
Yes. Well, you're absolutely right. And how you approach a person for the first time. You don't. You have to. Your body is might be threatening. Your body might be welcoming. You don't know. You don't know initially. So it's you have to make split second uh, adjustment to how you approach people and now how you approach animals, just like you say. Um, but I think the way artists look at at situations um, is very useful. Very useful because we are trained observers, and we don't. I guess we don't think of ourselves necessarily being trained because we sort of assimilate our through our observation. We are maybe self-taught in a lot of ways,
It's
but
assimilation. I think you're right. That's a perfect word
yeah,
because if we look at all the modalities of art, like we think about dance,
yeah,
music, it comes through in different ways, but it's like energetic. And I just think it's this, and it's also, it's not just like you're born one day and you can observe everything. It is
right,
practice.
right,
And the more you do it, the better it's like tuning your guitar. A guitar sounds like crap unless you start tuning it to where it needs to be able to be played, right? You can't just, it's like you need to understand, and you do a lot of acrylic, right? But you've also
yeah.
done all the printing side. I mean, how did you know what modality, or is that even the word? Is modality the right word? I'm in a whole other world right now.
Well,
Um,
not
what,
exactly, but which 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 art material you're attracted to. I mean, you try a lot of them, and some are really going to grab you, And some art. I think that acrylic grabbed me um, by accident because I was after I got to go to graduate school, I lived in an apartment, and people started complaining about the oil paint smell, the turpentine smell.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, so I had to stop what I was doing with oil paint, which I was real familiar with, and had to switch to a different medium. And I didn't have a choice about it unless I wanted to leave, and I didn't. So that's what I did, and there were adjustments in that. So because it dries a little faster, and it just there's a different feel to it. So anyway, you just in my case it worked out really well because there were a lot of things that I could do with it that I couldn't do with oil paint. So
Mm.
I just adjusted.
Does that help you in doing the series? Because you paint in series, you also do dry point. We'll talk about that too. But when you do series, does that help you? Because I understand that from the point that I never feel done on anything. And I can't, in that, like, there's always more. Like, a story is
Hmm.
never told to the entirety, right?
Right.
It just, I mean, that's probably why we do what we do. You can't just do one episode of art. There's, and
Right.
you were born on the Jefferson Highway, right? And we're doing the Jefferson Highway travel guide. And now everyone, this goes from Winnipeg to New Orleans. I'm bringing it up. I'm never going to stop on this now. We've talked about this on a gazillion shows, but I bring that up as a point. Like, we're supposed to do the guide, and it's like, oh my gosh, that's like how many states, another country. And like, you cannot do, it's an encyclopedia, and then it's a moving thing because everything's adding and there's new and old and everything. So in art, like, to me, you're presenting a scene. It's like Nancy doing the go back to the Pride of Lions. Well, this one over here has got the tail from the impala kill running around. The mama's over here waiting to go in after the dad's eaten. The dad, it's like this whole family series. But if you do it in one painting, you're actually not going to get what is going on with the dad, what's going on with the mom, what's going on with the siblings and the impala.
Well, I
You know what
think
I mean?
I yeah, I do, and I think series are useful for the artist because the artist spends a certain amount of time working on an individual piece. By this time, by people sort of the artists have a point of view, I think, and my point of view grew out of my experience as an art therapist and working with old people. So I did a lot of I did a huge series of old people, and they were all sitting but in different kinds of chairs, and they were expressing different personalities. They were different moods. I found these people very very interesting. I could not do portraits of them because it would have violated their privacy. So I was doing little tiny sketches, like line drawings, of how they were sitting because they were very evocative. And so I would go home and I would do a large painting, like 40 by 40, from this little tiny drawing, and I would, but when I would get to the face, some of them were faceless,
Mm.
or their faces were kind of blurred out because I didn't want to, I couldn't violate their their
Privacy.
privacy
Yeah.
that way. So, but it was very interesting because people's body language fascinated me, and so I did this whole series of pieces of art. Some of them were paintings, some of them were drawings, some of them were prints. Um, of just one thing. But I think when the artist, himself or herself, stands back and they see all of the work at the same time, it's really gratifying. And
Mm.
because you've got your whole your it's like you wrote an essay, and it's a visual essay on how people's body language tells so much. So
Hmm.
uh,
It's a documentarian in a way. It is.
well, it is. Yeah. And so I was found after I started really being more of a painter than I was a therapist um, that I like to have one person shows because showing somebody one piece of work uh, that's not associated with any other piece of work that has that kind of theme to it doesn't isn't as impactful
Okay.
usually.
So it's kind of like musicians who want the album. They have a concept album. There's albums
Yeah,
of all the different songs and they've gathered them over the years. But then there's the bands and the musicians who put a concept album together. It could be the aliens are landing and this is what happened. And then they get all crazy cool
yeah,
stuff, right? Or it could be
yeah,
a theme. We understand this because we're publishers. To me, one thing on a website does not equate a magazine, as we've talked before. It's just this
right,
different, it's a single going out, like one song, a one hit wonder, but the whole
yeah,
album takes you on an experience versus just
yes,
one thing. Now, the argument is the one thing could be epic versus all the rest, but like to me, there's a context to it. It's like,
right,
yeah, I want all of it. I want it all. I want the A and B side and more. And I want the album notes, the liner notes, the scriptures, like how people do their little sideline drawings. And I
right,
want the whole epic experience. And I think that's what art is. Art is an experience for the artist and for those who soak up the art,
right.
whether no matter what it is. So you do these series and you've done them with cats. And I remember people going, when we first all got together, right? And people are like, "Oh, she's a cat artist," and I'm like, "No, she's not." Well, yeah, she's got cats, and I'm like, "No, it's called the movement." And if you know anything about cats, they have movements that are like human in a way, if not smarter.
Yeah.
I'm just saying.
Well, yeah, well, you can't. You have to do it for yourself because you can't second guess pleasing the people that look at what you do.
But your
You hope
cats
they do.
are are
Yeah,
perfect.
you have a connection. You got a connection with some people sometimes, and that's always makes you have a good feeling. Um,
Yeah.
but people haven't had the experiences that the artist has. They have different experiences, and so they will interpret the work based on their experience,
Or a lack
don't you
of.
think?
Yeah, lack
Yeah,
of. It's either way. It's like this is comfortable to me, makes me
yeah,
nostalgic, feel good. This I love this because
right,
this is part of my life. Or like the one painting we were talking about with Nancy, jolts you into this other thing that
yeah.
makes you feel all
And there are
these.
people. There are
How dare
eh,
they? And your horses too. I mean, the horses. I mean, you've
yeah,
done everything. You've done a series on New Mexico, the New Mexico label series. Is one of
yeah,
just what I loved about that is you showed, and I think this is New Mexico itself has that, uh, they did New Mexico True. So in social media, people use the hashtag New Mexico True because New Mexico, very similar, like Louisiana has done this too, is just, we are authentic. You're not going to tell us who to be. This is who we are, what we are. And it's just, when you go to New Mexico, it is a series of experiences from high-end art to you're going to find art in a cabin somewhere very remote.
yeah.
Like you just don't know what you're going to
Or
get. And that's the beauty of it, you know?
yeah, or petroglyphs even.
Yeah, that's a whole other thing. So you do that, but then also you started collecting. Okay,
Yeah,
dry point. You've also done, monoprints. So there's a lot of, and that's hand pulled printing. You've shown Nancy and I in person how that works, which is incredible. So you did acrylics. Before we get into the collecting, you went into that and dry point. So you've got this also, and please, you already know me well enough to absolutely tell me where I'm wrong. And I don't care how long someone knows, go for it. Um, you I think through the figurative art that you do with your paintings, that you allow this movement, but you also allow this simplicity to be so that you can capture that movement within your art because it's figurative, right? So if a cat's moving or a human is moving or there's symbolism in there too, you have things like I'll never forget the egg beaters and your mom, like that's different to, I mean, everyone's like, what is that? You've had bones in there. You've had all kinds of things in your art with what is telling a story that you tell, which you do in series, sometimes not. But there's a simplicity to the dry point and also the monoprints in it that also I think simplicity is everything at times. Sometimes art is complete chaos because that's what it's
Yeah.
representing, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And abstract and all of that, which is all of it's great. But there's like, no matter what's going on, you tend to have a linear thing that happens in there that goes, that's the movement, but I'm going to add all this that is
Well,
part of, does that, I don't know. I'm not saying this very well,
yeah.
but
Yeah.
it's
Well,
simplicity is
I,
everything in there.
well, I guess I focus. I use shapes a lot, and so
Yeah.
I have my negative space is as important to the painting as the positive space of the figure, and so that helps to simplify it because you're with the negative space just as background shapes. Um, it focuses on the figures, and it does simplify the painting. I like movement. You mentioned that, and we've talked about that. Um, I I get movement going through the painting by um, I use a lot of diagonal shapes. So diagonal is always energetic rather than a straight line, let's say. But in addition, I've adopted some cartoonist uh,
Mm-hmm.
mannerisms in that sometimes I will put a little like movement line like you see in cartoons sometimes a little extra color uh slightly away from the figure that indicates that there's a movement there to the body. But I like that. I like the movement through. I like my compositions usually, and I spend a lot of time on composition. Um, I learned that the hard way.
Well, I think
The-
your shapes are that. I mean, I look at your paintings. I mean, I've seen you in different stages and I just go like, that's already done. And you're like, no, it's not. I'm like, but like for me, I can see it, you know, it's just, I just really appreciate art and I appreciate it even more now that I've learned more about art over our podcast conversations and also going out and seeing more art in our world. And now I'm more
right.
educated to see it. So like the education component that you have done over the years is huge. And even just through this collecting that you've done, the early 19th and 20th century prints, that is a huge thing. And you have you have collected not just what the style of what you do, but you appreciate, if you look at a record collection from me, you'll get everything from Tchaikovsky to Pink Floyd to Bob Dylan, whatever. You're going to get it all. And at the same, and you're going to find, like in my collection, a bunch of people you probably haven't heard, but are really way up there, just like the greats. And I think that's what
Right.
you do too. You're a true connoisseur of the arts and you're a connoisseur. That's a good word today, but an appreciator. Like you understand
Yeah.
and you've kept people legacies online. And I really just want to acknowledge that because every time we do a show on some artist that no one really knows about, but has had this huge history, but it gets lost. And, this is why museums are so important so they don't get lost. But you've written articles,
Yeah.
you've done podcasts with us on them. And then I go to search them. And then we've talked about that last time. It's like, oh, here we're back to us, you and us again. All right. But I think it's so important that you pave that path forward for artists. And I think you go talking about that teacher you had in when you went to college that taught you how to have that
Yes.
artist's way in a way. I think you're also setting that example for other art, whether it's an art enthusiast, art lover, may not be able to do what you do in painting, but collectors and just enthusiasts, right? Art lovers and
Well, yeah.
artists
Yeah.
to keep promoting those who've come before you and carry that torch. Musicians do it very easily because we will perform the songs, record the songs. But in your kind of art, visual art, it's not always that easy. So I think that's very important what you have done. And I just really thank you for that because you've taught
Well,
me personally a bunch on that.
that's really nice of you, Lisa. Thank you. I'm glad that that you've gotten things out of something I might have said. But I think teaching like this is something I enjoy so much. I enjoy the art so much. I have a hard time not talking about it, and not talking about the artists that have done things before I was alive. A lot of times, because I get excited about contemporary painting. But I think it's important we don't forget where we've been, and even the subject matter in earlier work tells us so much about the country
Yeah,
and
the
how
world.
people reacted at certain times. Things have happened. There have been wars. There have been famines. There have been times when people were out of work. But there's been good times too, and art shows all of that. And it's like history. I taught art history. I always loved teaching art history more than I love teaching painting, um, because what they would have to people would come into my class and they were there because it was a requirement and they really didn't want to be there. And so it was always my job and my um challenge to change their mind during the semester without beating them over the head. So um, I would send them to museums as part of their assignment, and they would have to pick something out and write about it. There was some groaning, of course, when that was assigned, but they would come back almost to a person and say they had never been to a museum before. So it was, I mean, they came back and they were amazed that the museum was like that, of art museum. And several people told me toward the end of the semester that they had always hated history. They hated remembering dates. They didn't see the point to it. But art history was different because even though they were looking at things and talking about the same era and time, oftentimes that it meant more to them. It was more concrete somehow to see a visual representation of an era. So I always appreciated hearing from them.
Love that you've done all the education part because I think even as you educate others, you're educating yourself too. That's the
Yeah,
thing,
right,
isn't
right.
it? Like,
Yeah.
it's
Well, you
wonderful. And I
are.
think there's always something new. No matter what, you may know something really well.
Yeah,
When you go back in there, you're like, oh, that's a thing. You could go to a museum, right? And they have a permanent
yeah.
collection. You go back to see the permanent collection. You're going to see something you didn't see before. And it could be on
That's
every
right.
single painting, sculpture, you know, you're going to see something new and it's going to make you think differently. It's going to make you open your brain a little bit more and
Yeah.
get out of your comfort zone and really do things in life. That's a thing. Art is supposed to give us a jolt or sometimes comfort when we need it. Sometimes that's it. I
Yeah.
wanted to say this in art. I'm addicted to the Antique Roadshow. Well, it's the stories. It's not this, it's the stories of who created something because
Right, right.
if it's an antique glass, the vase, whatever, there's an artist involved because it's workmanship. You remember your chairs with the earth and
Absolutely.
fire?
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about? All of that, someone handcrafted back then, right? The glass, all of this, and how they did their signatures and everything. You watch this, and then some people are there to find out the value and can I, buy a new house or whatever. And then there are people that this stuff has gone through their family. They didn't understand everything, but it's something that they look at every single day of their life. And
Yep.
even if it was worth $500,000, they're sitting there going, this is part of my life. This painting means that much to
Yep.
them that it's not just about buying and selling. And I find that so beautiful. And then to hear how it's gone through a family. So how art touches families generationally. And I mean all
Oh
kinds of
yeah.
families.
Mm.
That's the thing. So I'm so glad we're talking about this. It's Arts and Humanities Month. How do the arts affect you as an individual and your family and your friends? That's what I ask our listeners today. Victoria ended up on
Mhm.
quite a journey. Look at this, educator, therapist, also an artist and a very awesome artist. And go to her website, victoriachick.com, by the way. And then here she is, spurred on even further to work to create a museum in her southwest portion of New Mexico. So go to southwest-art-museum.org. All of that is listed in the episode notes as always. It's so much fun. I could talk for hours with you. You know that. Nancy too, about art, but I love it. I love that you collect miniature paintings and, oh, here's this, sculpture of a crazy this, or, you allow art to be art. And I remember that one time when we came to see you in Silver City and we were doing the 8 Keys of Excellence and everybody chose a key of excellence to talk about. You chose integrity. And you had like a one line sentence, and that was that for the podcast or the video. And it was like, art is integrity. And if you violate that, you're not an artist, basically. Boom. And it was like, all right, well, we're on to the next. It was so powerful in that, on to the next filming because you saved us a bunch of time, but it was very powerful about the importance of integrity. And that goes back to, I think, even your beginning journeys of do it
Yeah.
right. Think about as you were a therapist, so
Yeah.
thank you. It was
Yeah.
fun.
You go through life and it's, things affect you in sequence, kind of, but you're not really maybe aware of it at the time. And so you look back and then think, oh yeah, that was a good thing that happened, or something that jumped out at you later in years when you look back, and I appreciate thinking about. I really think about people that have inspired me and really helped me along the way. And
We all have to pay
it's
it
been an
forward. That's what I get out of this. I'm like, we
well,
all have to pay it forward.
I'm trying that. I'm trying. So, but what, you're probably running out of time, but I do want to say about New Mexico because I find it really a great place to live. I've lived a lot of nice places: San Diego, Kansas City, uh, lived in Ohio where it was very beautiful. But this is the best place for me that I've ever lived because I'm surrounded by creative people, and um, there's a lot of poor people in New Mexico. Uh,
Hmm.
but they all respond. They all respond to art. There's a lot of. I mean, New Mexico has a terrible reputation as being a low achieving schools, and that's true. But but what I'm trying to do with the art museum is is raise the level of desire to learn. I think one of the ways that we can do that is visual,
Hmm.
and have programs that encourage people, don't stop them. To show them a way to success. That's one reason I think museums are really important, because they can look at what other people have done. They can see things that inspire them. I don't think that any town can ever have too many museums. Art museums are good. I thought it was really interesting when I was doing this that 65% of all people learn better visually than any other way. And so, if there's a language problem, if there's a situation where you're not getting the support from home, that learning things visually will help you out of
Hmm.
the awful situation that you find yourself in, of being afraid of school or not liking school or whatever. So anyway, I have high hopes for the museum.
I think it's an amazing project, and I really think that it's a true grassroots movement,
Yes.
and I mean that in a very positive way, and because when people come in, whether they're giving $5, 1,000, 10,000, 100,000, 200, 500, or art, or giving books, like your Flanders Library, right?
Yes.
All of that is, number one, the person giving feels good. They feel
Yes.
better than when they didn't give. And sometimes it's the people who can't give that do give their back shirt, right? And it
Yes.
makes them keep going, because when you give, you have more hope. And that's really true. When you give, even in your worst place in life, and you give to somebody else or some cause or something, you will feel better than the horrible place you may be at that time, right? You may be in a bad
Right.
point in life, or whatever it is. The way to pull forward is to do something positive. And that is that. And when it comes to, I mentioned the arts and funding. Well, the reality is, it's great when people actually get involved with their hands, with their what they
Oh, yes.
can do. Like, it's $5. You are invested. You as an individual helped to make that museum. And I think that is something that can be part of a human's legacy, no matter what the dollar value is, right? Because the dollar value
Absolutely.
goes beyond. You cannot put the value on art. I understand we put values on paintings and buildings and all that stuff, but the ripple effect of art, you can't even start to bring it in. Like, I try to do this with Victoria, but look at her ripple effect already. Look at how many people did you touch in your life in art as a human, right? And so just think about that. As we help with nonprofits and all of this art, museums, whenever we really do something, the ripple effect, we can't capture it. It's bigger than that fisherman's net. It's bigger.
Right.
And wouldn't you like to be part of that? It's better. So anyway, that's my 2 cents. My two
Huh.
cents just tripled with that ripple.
Yes.
Hopefully. But anyway, Victoria, always a pleasure. Thank you so much for sharing more of your story this time instead of
Yeah.
everybody else's. So everyone, victoriachick.com, go look at her work, her prints that she's collected. Really an amazing artist. And we really appreciate all she's done over the years in education and going forward with this museum. Again, all the links are in the episode notes. Thanks so much.
Okay. Thank you, Lisa. Good talking to you.
Thank you for listening to Big Blend Radio. You can view Victoria Chick's artwork at victoriachick.com. Keep up with us at bigblendradio.com.